Now, Africa is where the real debate's going on in Alexandria, because Paul pretty much is dominant across Greece and Turkey and Rome. Paul and Peter eventually go to Rome in about 60, and they both get martyred in around 64 by Nero. But they're venerated, St. Peter and Paul. So that whole Europe strain of Christianity, I'm pretty sure of what Christianity is. But down in Africa, there's some real problems. There's a man named Arius who's born around Libya, and he's taking the Jewish position that Jesus is less than God. Now Athanasius, who's in Alexandria, says, no, Jesus equals God. He's agreeing with the Greeks up in the across Turkey, and because Alexandria was a real center of learning of Greek culture, probably the most Greek city in the world at the time, even though it wasn't in what we now call Greece. And then the Gnostics, who were downriver, this is about where I found the Nag Hammadi, thank you, the scrolls and the Gnostic Gospels. And their idea of Jesus was like, Jesus was so fantastic that he wasn't human at all. He only seemed human. So they're on the side that Jesus is God, kind of took this human shell and then kind of walked around and taught some stuff. And they don't have a big influence because they're not really proselytizing like the other churches are. Their idea is, we have the secret knowledge. You can get into club if you believe like we do. So they're not proselytizing like Paul and Peter and Arius. And Arius goes up to and studies in Antioch, where he gets some support for his view. But then there's a big fight and saying, we got to decide, because Constantine says Christianity is the official state religions. Okay? Because I see it everywhere. This is good politically. Okay, now what do you people believe? And they said, well, I believe this and I believe that. And he goes, wait a minute, we're going to have a council. And they had it in Nicaea, which is near what would later be Constantinople, but it was about 4 years before Constantinople was founded. And Athanasius won. The idea that Jesus is God became doctrine for the Christian church. Now, that worked well for a while. Actually, there was another council that got rid of Athanasius, and then, after they were both dead, the church then in the early 400s said, yeah, Athanasius was right. So they decide Jesus and God are one. Yay. And then they say, what next? Now, Rome and Constantinople decide that Jesus is one person with two natures, a human nature and a divine nature. Now, this is kind of odd stuff thinking about this, because they're trying to solve the problem that if Jesus is God, what happened when God was dead for 3 days? And so they got the sense of, the part of God, the part of Jesus that was had human nature is what died, and the God nature lives on. And so that's how they solved it. And the Syrians and the African churches believed that Jesus was one nature and there was a combination of divine and human. This notion kind of gets expanded by Emerson, who kind of says this human and divine thing are actually the same thing. Jesus was the best possible human, and therefore he was divine, because our human nature is divine, is where Emerson went with that. But that's centuries beyond where we are now. So that's the Council of Chalcedon. And so they have that, and then they have to figure out what's next. Now, the Arians, after they were told that they weren't Christian anymore, well, they mostly went north. And they converted the Goths and the Visigoths and all those people. Now, the Visigoths come down and sack Rome in 410, and they end up settling in Spain. Now, then Islam, about 200 years later, is founded, and it splits in two almost 30 years after it's divided. The Shias go east towards Persia and lower Iraq, and the Sunnis come towards the Mediterranean and all the way to Spain. And they conquer Spain in I think the 800s, and then they were defeated. They were ruling Spain politically. They were defeated in 1492, which is a number that's etched in our school minds, as when Ferdinand and Isabella, while they were sending Columbus on his way, were making sure that Spain was a Christian Catholic nation. And so they are really Arian Christians mostly in Spain. They have the more lower belief about Jesus, about the humanity of Jesus. And so in some ways, that's why Muslims and the Christians in Spain could coexist better than other places, because, if the Muslim says, wait a minute, Jesus wasn't God, that's an affront to the notion of God being above us all. And the Spanish Christians say, yeah, I guess you're kind of right, who cares? Right? And so there was ability for them to live in relative peace. Now, the next big split in the church is the Great Schism. Now, remember the Church of Chalcedon basically got rid of the Coptics and the Syriac Church, and all the way to India because because of that two natures thing. But then they start say, well, since God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, where does the Spirit come from? And there's passages in the Bible that Jesus said, I will send a comforter. And so the church in Rome says that the Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. And the people in the Greek-speaking world, partly because of translation things, is scandalized by this, because their interpretation of proceeded is more, the word that they use is more like is created and given, not just given. And so they're saying that makes the Holy Spirit not co-equal with the Father and the Son. And therefore, Rome, we excommunicate you. And Rome responds by saying, Constantinople, we excommunicate you. And that's the split the Orthodox and the Roman Catholic Church. Also, a little bit shortly after that are the Crusades. And there's lots of 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. But basically, Rome decides that they want to get to the Holy Land. And part of it is to reclaim Jerusalem and the land of the saints and all that. But it also gives them the excuse to kill a lot of Orthodox people as they're going through Turkey and sack those cities. And up in Northern Europe, they did a massacre of Jews because, well, since we're killing for God, we might as well just start killing everybody. And so there's this constant struggle over the territory of where Israel, Syria, and Lebanon are, and Turkey. And so that goes on for a long time. And it's going back and forth until they finally get tired of that. We're tired of fighting over there, and probably partially because the Orthodox said, stop coming through our country to fight in the Holy Land. And so then there was a dispute between the Holy Roman Empire, which kind of was a political entity that kind of ran from here through Spain, and Rome, which was by that time the primary center of Christianity. So that early on in the early church, it was like Rome and Antioch and Constantinople and Alexandria and Jerusalem would get together and have meetings about what Christianity is about. But the Islam basically overran Antioch, Jerusalem, and Alexandria, and Jerusalem was overrun by the Romans in 70, and that's kind of why the Jewish strain of Christianity kind of died away, because they had no center which to be. There's later heresies called Ebionites, who again thought that Jesus was a prophet rather than God, but they were pretty much squashed, and so that Unitarian view of Jesus. But Rome and Avignon are fighting. It's the 100 Years' War, basically the whole century, that the Eastern, or the Spain and France are fighting against Rome, and Rome eventually wins, and therefore then that kind of wipes out the Arianism, the idea of Jesus as less than God, for a while. But these things don't last forever, because